I started this layout in 2019. I had a building that I built in the backyard, and when I couldn't do the flying anymore, my wife said, well, you used to have this big railroad in Illinois, why don't you build another railroad? So always wanting to do an Sn3 railroad, the Denver and Cat Canyon Western came to fruition. I modeled it as a freelance Sn3 pike because I built prototype railroads and I really just wanted to have fun with this and not worried about rivet counting and making sure every seam was exactly right. And I wanted the feel of an old mountain narrow gauge. So like Russ says, it's I call it Denver and Rio Grande-ish. And the main town, which I call Shamanesque, is actually Deadwood, named after the series, the HBO series. A lot of the structures in that town are named after that series, and I just had a little bit of fun with that. Construction is nothing special. It's your standard L girder. I use particle board for sub road bed and cork for the road bed. I find that the cork deadens the sound a little bit, and it also holds the ties real well. The track is about 90% hand laid, code 70 and code 55 microengineering with Mount Albert white pine ties. I use a wash of India ink and alcohol. And for the turnouts, there's a few Shinahars in the hidden areas that aren't seen. Otherwise, most of the turnouts I build in place. A few of them I use the Fastrax dig jig, but I prefer to do them in place so I get a nice smooth flow with the turnout itself. I use the NCE DCC system with wireless throttles and 7 power districts. 2 5-amp boosters handle the current. Right now I've got about 25 locomotives on the layout. I would say all but about 2 or 3 of those are PBLs, and it handles that without a problem. I also build a power supply from a computer transformer. I saw this on YouTube and thought, you know, that looks like a pretty neat idea. And the beauty of those systems are the transformers in those computers is they're divided between 12 volt, 5 volt, and 3.3 volts, and you can get almost 30 amps out of this thing. You can find them at a yard sale. You find somebody with a computer throwing it out because it's broken. Well, usually what breaks is the motherboard or the hard drive, and the power unit is still good. The most I've seen them go for is 20 bucks on eBay, but like I said, it's a really cheap, easy to build power supply. I'll go into that a little bit deeper as we go along here. Turnout control, I've got a couple of tortoises, but mostly I use caboose ground throws because for the operating, it just seems to make it a lot easier than guys trying to figure out what switch goes to what turnout. All the frogs have frog juicers from Tam Valley. That power supply, as you can see, it's just a basic computer power supply. You open the case up and just separate all the wires into colors, and each color is a voltage. As you see, the black wires are grounds, the yellow wire is 12 volts, the red wires are 5 volts, and the orange wires are 3.2 volts. So you can run that bus line around your layout, and you can power all your switch machines, you can power LEDs without resistors, you can do just about anything you want with them. And like I said, it's all the power you'll ever need. And if you need an article, just Google computer power supply for model railroads and into YouTube, and you'll come up with just a whole bunch of different articles on it and videos. Here it is. This is the board I'm making now for my extension that I'm adding on to. Like I said before, my main layout is Denver and Rio Grande-ish. I've added on an extension to my building, and it's going to be RGS-ish. So this is what will power that, the command board and the frog juicers and the turnout and the turntable controller. As far as the scenery goes, I love the big mountain railroading. All my railroads have been like that. I modeled the Denver and Rio Grande standard gauge in my earlier layout, and this one is no exception. In the past, I've used the old standby hard shell plaster, hydrocal molds, and all that. And I started doing that with this railroad and quickly discovered that it was just going to be too heavy, too messy, too time consuming. And I was looking for a better way to do it. So I thought, well, I'll try the foam, because I've seen guys do the foam carving and use the sheet foam and even the spray expanding foam. So I tried that. Really didn't like it. It's messy. Didn't really give me what I wanted. Still looking for something different. And a buddy of mine gave me this video of Tom Miller's big F-scale layout, and Joel Bragnon was doing the layout for him and explaining how his system worked. I watched it for a little bit, gave Joel a call. He sent me a sample pack, and I went through the learning curve, and really it in my opinion, it's one of the easiest, best techniques for doing mountain rocks, and quick and easy to do. And it's no smell, very little cleanup, and part of the learning curve is it's very fast. You have, from the time you start mixing it, you've got roughly 15 minutes to use those parts. But once you get used to it, it goes pretty quick, it's pretty easy, and costs a little more money, but the lack of time and mess is really a fair trade-off. And like in the previous clinic, trees, got lots of trees. And I've used pretty much every session, every technique that Jeff was showing, different ones. I do have one of the Mackenzie tree machines, which works very nicely. I use the Scenic Express line. It's called Super Leaf. They make a really nice product that you can sprinkle on and really give you a good looking leaf. And hairspray. And I cover the bottoms with, I go to this local vineyard, and you can get, after they do the end of the season harvest, they have the grapevines. And if you hollow it out, it'll slide right over that twisted up piece of wire that's in your bottle brush piece. Operation is Waybell car cards. It's something I have been using for a lot of years. I make the waybells and car cards. I have the Ship It program. Part of that program is it allows you to print up the waybells and car cards. So I use that. This is one of my card boxes at Cook Lumber. You can see that they just separated in. I use 4-sided waybells. In my scheme, I have the operators, when they spot the car in a location, I have them turn the waybell. That means that I don't have to go around and swap waybells after every session. And as long as the car card stays with the car, it'll always get to where it's going eventually. Anyway, here's an example of some of my trees, similar to what Jeff was showing. This is the Super Leafs sprayed over with some hairspray and sprinkled on. And these are the Super Tree armatures and sagebrush armatures. And then these are my bottle brush trees. And that's you can see down here, this is the grapevine material that you can hollow out. It's got like a core that actually comes right out. It's almost a soft material. And once it pops out, the wire kind of goes right in there really easy. Here's the track plan. The layout room is roughly 22 by 27, and I've just added a 10 by 16 extension onto it, which is going to be the next section of the railroad. Now that I've bored you to death with all that stuff, how about we get on with the actual layout tour? As you walk in the door of the layout tour, or the layout room, the first thing you see on the left is the She's All Mine. Again, I like to have fun with the names, so we do that to a lot of stuff. It's a Banna kit that it was the first kit I built, Sn3 kit, and I stuck it on the corner here. And as you come into the room, it's right there. And if you look to the left, you see this. If you look ahead, you'll see the namesake Cat Canyon with Eagle Falls and the trestles and bridges that cross it, which will show you at a later slide. Moving on from the mine, we cross Dusty Creek and we see the first example of the rock work. This was the hydrocal castings and the screen wire. And if you look at the top of the tunnel, you'll see there are some cracks here and here, and that's because the whole top of the mountain has to be made to be removed because there's staging underneath the whole thing. A bane to my existence, but I'll explain that later. I have telltales I've scratch built for each of the tunnel portals. Shay number 1 crossing Dusty Creek headed toward Cook Lumber. And here's the BTS log lumber mill that Russ was talking about. My wife bought me this as a present for Christmas one year, and I thought, oh, okay, it takes up a lot of real estate, but it's quite an impressive model. View from the log dump and the dump track. And again, if you see in the background, all the tops of these mountains are removable. Here's the sawmill itself with the loading docks. Over here is the pump house. Moving along, we see the powerhouse. And again, this is all part of the removable mountain. The mountain is made in 5 sections that come out one by one, kind of like a puzzle. Here you can see one of the gaps here that I haven't put the covering back over. And there's an overall view of the whole lumber complex with the engine house. And this is what's under the staging. There's 3 tracks of staging in the main line that run through this. And it tends to be problematic. Operating sessions, guys forget to put the tracks back to the main, and we have derailments. And it was one of the inspirations for me wanting to do an addition, which is going to eliminate this staging and create a staging yard that's open. This is the staging under the tunnel. I bought these cheap little car backup cameras. You can get them on Amazon or eBay. They're like 25 bucks. They're 12 volt plug and play. You just hook them up, turn it on, aim your camera. They'll even do infrared, although I have an LED strip under there to help light it up. But I have one on each end so you can see what the tracks are doing and where the problem is before you have to dive in there and fix it. And this is the staging controller. It's a rotary switch that's set up with a diode matrix, so all you do is pick the track and all the turnouts line up accordingly. But if you forget to put the track back, you end up with trains on the wrong tracks or bad things. So we're going to leave the Cook Lumber Company area and head into Deadwood. First thing we see coming into Deadwood is Efforts and Sons Sheep Ranch and the Delaney Corners, which is a hot spot outside of town. It's like the only gas station in town, so everybody has to go there to get their fuel and their repairs, and it's kept pretty busy. On the right side, we see the Deadwood Jail. And I don't know if the guy hauling out of there with his pack over his shoulder just got released or he's just trying to avoid the local constable. Little beauty shot of Deadwood Delaney Corners, night shot. Guy checking his oil, getting his gas. Tow truck driver's getting ready to go on a run, it looks like. And across the tracks, we joined the Everson Son stock loading pen. This is mostly scratch built with parts off of, I want to say it was a Banta stock kit. It was kind of a kit bash setup. In the background, you'll see the tank. That's a PBL tank. This was an earlier photo, so that tank was moved. The photo you saw before, you saw the jail is where the tank is. The tank got relocated. And there's the Woolies waiting for their chance to get out of town, even though they don't realize where they're headed. John Allen's book got me into model railroading. And I've always liked his work, and one of the things that he always had on his railroads and his pictures when he did them for MR was a dinosaur in there. So my wife and I were going on our morning walk one day, and I look in the middle of the road, and here's this little rubber dinosaur laying there. And I picked him up, and my wife looks at me and she goes, "What are you going to do with that?" And I says, "Oh, I got an idea." So I brought him home and I put him on the layout. And I had this little figure. So I stuck this figure in his mouth. And the figure is an HO figure. So this is the end of HO. Moving on, we see the end of the main road going into Deadwood and the freight platform at the station, the Deadwood station. I mean, all the structures are lit and have interiors in them. In the background, all those buildings are the same way. They're all lit up and have full interiors in them. Most of them have scenes inside, checker players or card players or pool players or something like that. And here's Deadwood from the other end of town. Little interesting note is during the symposium, one of my good friends, John Coker, who does the art and used to be an engineer for the Rio Grande, was here, and I brought him over to the corner of the railroad. I says, "John," I says, "do you see this guy standing by the bar right here?" And he goes, "Wow." He says, "Yeah." I says, "He looks familiar." And I said, "That's John Coker." He says, "Oh." He says, "Yeah, that could be me." And he says, "I don't know if you're going to work or coming from work." And he says, "Well," he says, "I never drank going before work." He says, "But afterwards was a whole other story." So he liked that. And as we get to the far end of town, this is the Gem Saloon, which if any of you know the Deadwood series, that was the main character. Swearinger owned the hotel / brothel, and it was the hot spot in town. So I had to put one of those in. This is a kit bash off of 2 Banta kits stuck together. And the engine terminal. This is the Deadwood engine terminal. It's the coaling tower and the sand tower and sand house. That's all scratch built. And just some more yard shots. All my backdrops I hand painted. I watched a lot of PBS and Bob Ross, so I channeled my Bob Ross and painted all these mountains and clouds and scenes. Another shot of the engine area. That's a Walther's Cornerstone kit that I modified for Sn3. Engine house, this scratch built, made from Mike Blazik plans. And now we'll head out of Deadwood and we're gonna go up toward Antelope Creek. And this is Camp 1. This is our first logging facility. Big spar tree there for the guys cutting down trees and loading them up onto the flat cars and the log cars. The donkey engine for controlling the spar tree. And the lower level, which is the Antelope Creek Bridge that heads up towards Antelope Junction. Below the bridge, we have the hobo camp with the guys getting ready to make up their stew. And we head up the hill toward Antelope Creek, Antelope Junction, I mean. And the tank in the background there is the one that got relocated from Deadwood. Now, I had an issue when I first built this. I don't know if we can see it in this back slide, but you can see how much area there is to the right side of the track here. About 6 or 8 inches, because I had a creek that went along that. And it was fine for aesthetics and scenery, but during operating sessions, that area back there got to be pretty small. And watching guys squeezed in there just made it hard to operate back there. So I got thinking one day, I don't really need that creek. So I grabbed the Sawzall, I cut that out, moved everything back, gained about 8 inches or so. This is the piece I cut out of there. So if you guys got your railroads and you have an issue with it, don't be afraid to change it. I mean, it's model railroading, and if it doesn't work, nothing works the first time. Just do what you got to do to fix it. And then here's the seam, put it all back together. You can see here is just a little bit of, there's like about 2 inches here for right away. And we gained just a lot of space here in this little corner for operating, because we have a ton of Cimarrons on this side over here, and you've got a guy there working the yard, plus you've got crews coming through. Here's Antelope Junction with the tank and the speeder house and maintenance crew. And then the track to the right here goes over to the oil depot. And this is an area that gets switched during operations. So this would be an area people would be standing, and it's right next to Cimarron, where there's a lot of switching going on in the yard and making up trains. And that's an operating oil derrick. This is another example where some of the HO stuff works pretty well. This is a Walters HO kit. And this was a Walters HO kit for Sn3 cars, and they really don't let that out of place. These tanks I scratch built, and these little buildings. And here's Cimarron, where we've made it through the tunnel around the mountain, and we're into Cimarron. Back part of Cimarron is the stock unloading. This is where the sheep end up at and meet their demise and get themselves turned into packaged goods. And this building not only is lit, has an interior, but there's also a sound system on it. So if you get near the area there, you'll hear the little sheep baying. And this is before I did the scenicking on the railroad on this part, as far as building and stuff goes. This is my first Kitwood turntable that I bought. And I'll tell you that the Kitwood kits are just amazing. They're well engineered. They're a laser cut wood that go together just beautifully. And this was the smaller one, which turned out I was sorry I put the smaller one in there, because it'll just barely turn a C-class locomotive. I bought the bigger one. In fact, I just bought 2 of them. One of them's going in the new edition, and the other one is going to replace this one. So I'll cut out a little scenery and move it over a little bit, and it's a 65 foot. So I think it's bigger than that. It's 100 and some foot. Anyway, it'll be able to turn maybe even a K27 on it, but it's going to replace this one. And then as we move along, here's that same scene with some more buildings put in and scenery added. This is another issue where first operating session, the guy came in and he's working on the yard guys. I'm watching him struggle with moving cars around, and the track plan just did not work. And after the session, I grabbed the water and alcohol and removed all the buildings and everything I could get off that wasn't disposable, and sprayed it all down and peeled up the track and took a chisel to the ties, took the belt sander, got it back down to sub road bed, and relayed the whole yard, the whole area. Next operating session, the guys came in. It was a completely new yard, and it works just fine now. Everybody's happy with it. Here we see number 42 getting ready to head out. This is one of the trains that's made up in Cimarron. This is the engine house on the far end of town. In the background, you can see all the structures and scenery that's been added since that first slide. Here's a little shot of the interior of the engine house. We got a couple guys in the backyard that are having a little bit of a discussion as to who did what to where. And you can also see the power lines and all that detailed stuff that's put in there. And the tail end of 42 as we get ready to leave town. Here's Cimarron tank. This is the last tank going up the hill. The crews are required to fill their tenders because they're going to be using a lot of fuel going up this hill. This is a 4% grade. And as we head up the hill, we go into the first tunnel that gets us to Fox Point. Fox Point is the end of the peninsula where we have a mine, the Ziegler-Conowingo mine, that I scratch built from a picture I saw of a guy's layout in New Zealand that had an O-scale mine like this, and I really liked the looks of it. So I took his pictures and studied it and made my own drawings and scratch built this little mine complex, and it's kind of on the corner of the peninsula, so it stands out pretty well. And as we come out of the tunnel, Fox Point, we end up in Camp 2. This is the second logging camp where logs are loaded and sent over to the lumber company. That's a railway engineering. Steve Hatch is a good friend of mine, and I use some of his turnouts, controls, switch machines, and it's an operating switch stand. I use them on the standard ones. I've got a couple of code 55 stub switches, and I also use them on that because you can adjust them pretty well and don't need to put a lot of stops in to make the stub switches work. Again, a shot of Camp 2 as we're heading up the hill toward Summit Siding, which is the high point on the railroad. Again, this is all hand-laid track. This in the foreground is code 55. In the background there it's code 70. And here we see stock extra 461 sitting on the siding, waiting for a meet on the, I imagine the passenger train's coming through. So he's sitting there waiting. And the tail end of the stock extra. And here's an example of the Bragdon Enterprises rock. Stuff is really neat because their advantage to it is once you, before it's cured, it's malleable. You can bend it, you can shape it, you can cut it with scissors, and you glue it down with hot glue, and you fill the cracks with regular painter's caulk. And at any time during the life of this product, if you don't like where it is or how it fits, I've had a couple issues where I put it in, and after I ran some trains, I found clearance issues. Well, if you take a heat gun and heat it to 200 degrees, it becomes malleable again. You can move it, you can push it, it'll bend, and as soon as it cools, it stays wherever you put it. So it's really neat stuff like that. Here we see the lower bridge over Cat Canyon, and this is the route going into Cimarron. Comes from Deadwood through the mountain, around the mountain, over the bridge, and into Cimarron. And the upper bridge in the back, that's the one that goes back into Deadwood. They're both scratch-built bridges. The back one was done with a lot of styrene and some Central Valley bridge parts. Front one was just stick-built. Another shot going the other way. And yes, that's Jimmy Booth in the back contemplating why he went through 3 Blue Nami decoders at the symposium. And I like to double head trains if I can. And when I do double head them, I have 2 engineers with 2 throttles. I don't consist anything. I like to run it like the railroad would. So I'll put 2 crews on, and it's up to them to work together to make the train work, which allows them to break up and do 1 engine switching if they want to, and adds for a lot of operating fun. What have I done since that? Well, here's the addition. This is what it used to look like, and that's what it looks like now. This is going to be the extension onto the railroad. This is a short sketch of what's going to happen in the other room. This is going to be, like I said, RGS-ish. We're looking at Rico and Lizard Head and Durango. And here's where it's coming off the railroad at the upper level. I cut a hole in the wall. Actually, I heated this piece over here. Like I said before, I cut it up here and I heated it and just bent it back. And later on, I'll fill this all back in with rock and make this a right full tunnel. It goes into a lift out bridge and comes down. And this is going to be the new staging yard. This part I've just got the track on this week. I painted the backdrop. It's got some more detailing to go to it, but it's pretty much ready to go. And there's the newer Kitwood turntable. And the hole in the wall that was the wall of the garage is where it'll go into the other room and then connect up with the other part of the layout. And this is going to be hidden by a snow shed. The Lizard Head snow shed. We're going to stick it out here maybe a couple inches, and on the other side a couple inches, and that'll hide the hole. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed it.